Hello everybody, welcome back to another Smart Purchasing video. In today's video, we are going to be doing alternate future of the United States. This is episode 2. In the last video, well, as you can see, we formed a bunch of alliances and had some wars. That's the alliance map. Let's just get right into the video. So in the last video, Ohio and West Virginia united, and in this video we're going to continue off with Ohio. They're going to be fighting against Kentucky just because they want more river access. So let's just get into that really quick. Okay, so Ohio has about 15,000 troops. West Virginia has about 9,000, so together they have 25,000. Kentucky has about 7,500 troops, so they're kind of done for. Let's just say Ohio is going to have a lot more river access after this war. So they go in from the border, obviously. Kentucky doesn't have many rivers that go this way. They mostly go like there. But there is one river that kind of goes like that. So they're going to be going down that river. And they've gone down the river. And they're going to continue pushing into Kentucky. I don't know for sure where their capital is. Let me just check. So their capital is like here. So I'm just going to say it's Ohio because, well, West Virginia really didn't do anything. They united with Ohio. But Ohio is trying to encircle the capital, and Kentucky doesn't like that. So they're going to try and push back with their 7,000 troops. They push back a little bit, but not enough to stop Ohio from invading. Then Ohio goes along the border between Kentucky and Tennessee, and they almost encircle their capital. They cut off its capital from the other side of Kentucky, which decides to surrender, which just causes this part to surrender as well. So let's take a look at a peace treaty. Okay, so in this peace treaty, Ohio basically annexed all of Kentucky except for this little part right here, which is completely separated by river, so I don't understand why Kentucky has it. So it was partitioned between Tennessee and Illinois. I don't know why I pronounced that with an S. Illinois. Okay, so the next war is going to be between Ohio, again, Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, and Indiana. And there could be an outside influence with this. There could be maybe Minnesota or Pennsylvania or New York in this war because they also border the Great Lakes. But basically this is just a fight over the fresh water of the Great Lakes. I feel like New York wouldn't join because they don't really need to fight over anyone with the Great Lakes except for maybe Pennsylvania. But then Pennsylvania, like, they're pretty closely tied, so they wouldn't need to. Minnesota could possibly join the war. So it's going to be Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and Michigan. And here are the teams for said war. Illinois and Ohio are the main teams. And the states, or I guess countries now, that are going to side with each one is Wisconsin will side with Illinois, and Michigan will side with Ohio. Now you might think Indiana would side with Illinois, but it would actually more likely side with Ohio just because they're more like economically tied with Ohio. The northern part of Indiana, if it was its own state, it would more likely join Illinois. It could cause internal divisions. Maybe Minnesota could join, but let's just go ahead and get started on this war. Okay, so the amount of troops that each state has, Wisconsin has 10,000, Michigan has 10,000, Illinois has about 50,000, Ohio, Kentucky, West Virginia has, I'm also using the amount of troops that were probably lost in that war, which I'm going to say was about 8,000. Kentucky probably didn't lose as many as you would think because they surrendered before many of their big city areas were killed, and these probably lost about 4,000 troops in the war. Indiana has surprisingly like 25,000 troops. So altogether, this side has 62,000 and this side has 60,000. So it's actually pretty evenly matched. This side has a little bit more, but let's just get started with the war. So Illinois is gonna go after more northern parts of Indiana as they already would want to side with Illinois. Wisconsin is going to go ahead and go into the northern part of Michigan. That's their like one weakness. Not one weakness, but it's one of their weaknesses is that it's kind of isolated. It doesn't have a lot of people there. But the red team is not going to have all the upper hands. Indiana and Ohio are coming into the south part of Illinois. Michigan launches a naval landing into Wisconsin. Goes pretty successfully. They have this entire thing surrounded, which they take. Wisconsin barely has any access to the Great Lakes at this point. The red team is going to come up through here, trying to focus on more major cities and coastline. So I looked up capitals, like where the location is of each state. Wisconsin's is there. Illinois is about here. Ohio is like here. Michigan's, I think it was here. And Indiana's is here. So they have yet to get each other's capitals. But that could be different for Illinois, as they are like right there at their capital. But it's not all bad for the red team, as they have taken almost all of the Upper Peninsula, just like this little bit in an island. They also take back a little bit of the water areas. Michigan takes back a little bit of southern Michigan. Indiana pushes back there. So now there is an opening and they get pushed into. Now the city of Chicago is almost taken over. And there's also a bad thing that's happening right now, which is that, well, these troops are about to be kind of discombobulated just a little bit, because they are going to get smacked from behind and encircled, and they have to retreat back to Chicago, which they do, which is not a good thing, because now they have really no troops in mainland states. And they're also almost on one of the biggest cities in the entire country. The third biggest city, I'm pretty sure, at least population-wise. But Illinois does manage to push back a little bit in the south, away from Springfield, and a little bit in the north, away from Chicago. So good for them. Michigan finally starts to pull it together as they push Wisconsin back a little bit in the Upper Peninsula. They also start to push more into Wisconsin from here. Illinois sees a opportunity. They push back against here, and then they go after the capital of Indiana, which they are about to take, because it's like right there. But for right now, it is a stalemate, and it stays a stalemate until they push back against Illinois a little bit. Doesn't really do much, but I mean, stalemate still continues. But there's going to be a state joining in on the war, and that is going to be Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is pretty strong, not super strong, but they are very strong economically, so they will bring a lot of money over to the blue team. They have about 18,000 troops, so they did bring a refresh of troops, but it does take a little bit for them to actually get there, and now they're finally here, which is kind of really bad for Illinois and Wisconsin, which they kick them out of there, and then they start push back into Illinois. They take Chicago, then they take the entire eastern part of both states, except for up here. Now they have like no water access except for here, which is not a good thing. Okay, well now they have water access, but it's only in Wisconsin. Chicago is taken, meaning that the entire economy of Illinois is gonna crumble. And if you know anything about having a bad economy, well, it's not good for the country. At least Wisconsin's pushing Michigan back, and now they're pushing into the Upper Peninsula. They've taken the Upper Peninsula. They're gonna try and do a naval landing. Doesn't go too well. They get kicked back out. Illinois is just crumbling over here. And Wisconsin is more focused on Michigan than their own actual ally, which is not a good thing. But now, Illinois is about to be split in half. The north side and the south side, which the south side is more likely to ally with Ohio. So if this actually does happen, then Illinois is kind of out of the war, at least the south side, which just so happens to have the capital. So now it's just Chicago, except there's no Chicago. So Illinois surrenders, and then Wisconsin surrenders. It's Ohio's team that wins. Yay! Let's take a look at a peace treaty. Okay, so this is the peace treaty. Indiana gets a bunch of eastern Illinois. Ohio gets some of the southern parts. Wisconsin gets the peninsula of Michigan. Chicago and Illinois are split. This is Chicago. This is Illinois. Illinois decides to join these states because the western/southern part of Illinois are more agriculture based, besides like the cities, obviously. But this is Chicago, and this is Illinois. Okay, so the next thing that we are going to be doing is we are going to be uniting some states, mainly here in New England, just because, well, they're all pretty similar anyway. The reasons why they would unite are they have like shared progressive values and like economic independence. They have advanced like financial and educational stuff, and they could all defend part of the Atlantic Ocean like on one side if they were to unite. We are going to unite them. Now, I don't know if Maine would join. They might want to be like annexed by Canada or something, so I don't know if they would actually join. So we are going to say that Maine does in fact join Canada. I know I said I wouldn't really do any outside factors and stuff. I mean, I might do some, considering what I'm gonna do with the next state on the chopping block. So Maine is officially gone from the United States. It's now a part of Canada. And the next state that I'm going to do is I'm going to have Alaska. So I don't know if Russia would invade Alaska or Canada would annex Alaska, because even though Russia would most likely want Alaska back if it became its own country, it would be very hard for Russia to invade it because of it's super icy, so they would have to wait until like summers and stuff, and even then it'd still be pretty deep waters. But Canada's just right there, so I don't know if Russia or Canada would get Alaska. So we're gonna say that Canada joins Alaska instead of Russia, just because it's more closely tied with Canada. It's historically tied with Russia because Russia used to own it, and Russia claims it's theirs, but it's really not. It's like saying that the UK claims the United States because it used to be a colony. So we are going to have one more war before I end the video, and maybe another alliance. So the next war that we're gonna have is gonna be over here on the eastern seaboard. So the states fighting in this war are Texas, Florida, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia. And the reason that these states are fighting is for economic reasons, and they want more water control over the Gulf of Mexico and East Coast. And they also just want like these big cities that like Georgia has, like Atlanta, Charleston, Raleigh. I think that's how you say it, Raleigh. I don't know.
Raleigh.
I knew that Virginia, Texas, Florida had a lot of troops. But surprisingly, all three of these states have more troops than Florida. South Carolina has about the same amount as Florida. Georgia has 132,000. North Carolina has 132,000 troops. South Carolina and Florida both have about 90,000, I think. Or no, it was like 120,000, something like that. Texas has 225,000, because we're also combining like New Mexico, northern Louisiana, most of Oklahoma. And Virginia has like 250,000. So these guys have about 540, like over 500,000 troops. These guys have about 1/3 troops. So this will be the bloodiest war that we have ever had, most likely. Let's just go ahead and get started. So since Florida and Virginia are the aggressors of this war, and Texas, they will be obviously attacking first with that like element of surprise and stuff. So Florida's going to go ahead and get the southern parts of Georgia, and Virginia will get the northern parts of North Carolina, mostly focusing on the coast. However, even though Florida has more here, Georgia is actually stronger by about like 40,000 or something, I think. So they actually have the upper hand down in the south. So they begin to start pushing Florida back all the way out of the state, except for a little bit over here. Then they start to push into Tallahassee, which is the capital. They get a little bit of coastline in the Gulf of Mexico. They cut off this part of Florida, which they start to invade. Virginia starts invading a little bit more into North Carolina. They take more of their coast. Still have quite a bit of coast left. North Carolina starts pushing back north, trying to kick Virginia out of the state and out of the coast, which they get them out of the coast a little bit, and they almost push them all the way back into the border up here. I think Raleigh or whatever it's called is like, it's like here. Now Florida seems to be losing, which it kind of is right now, but that is all gonna change when Texas gets its navy over here and starts to invade the coast of South Carolina and Georgia, where they eventually connect up with Florida, take the entire coastline of Georgia, except for in the south here. South Carolina kind of screwed. Georgia and South Carolina start pushing them a little bit back, but not so much. But Georgia is, however, having a field day in Florida, pushing further down the coast. Texas is pushing further inland, and they take Atlanta, which goes very successfully. South Carolina is getting invaded more. They now no longer have a coast, and Texas is pushing towards the capital, and Florida. However, this comes at a cost, as Georgia starts pushing back against Texas quite a bit. They even start pushing into South Carolina to try and help them out. They then start pushing further into Florida, trying to kind of circle the Floridians and Texans. However, they don't really, because, well, they're still here. They can still fight. Virginia starts pushing along the border between Tennessee and North Carolina, so they can start going into Georgia, which they do, and a little bit into South Carolina. They then thicken their strength and keep going along the border. South Carolina pushes back a little bit against Texas, gaining some coastline. Georgia pushes against Texas as well, almost cutting them in half. They barely have any stuff there. Florida pushes Georgia out of over here. However, Florida gets invaded on the coast still, which is not a good thing. Texas and Virginia are trying to push towards each other. They take Charleston, try and meet up to split South Carolina in half and split North Carolina and Georgia apart, which they do successfully. They start strengthening the border, and South Carolina decides to surrender. However, North Carolina still decides that they want to have that part of South Carolina still, so they try and keep it. Florida cuts off Georgia from here as they push them back out, killing thousands. They start pushing along the coast. They do pretty successfully. They take back Tallahassee, cut this part off from Georgia, and this part just surrenders back to Florida. Florida starts pushing up into Georgia, connecting back up with the Texans. They take Atlanta. I don't know any other major cities in Georgia. Georgia just decides to surrender. North Carolina is getting pushed into from the north, and they have been fully kicked out of South Carolina now. I don't think Raleigh has been captured because it's still right there, but it's borderline captured. They no longer have any coast, and Raleigh is captured, so they just surrender. Now let's take a look at a peace treaty. I'll also try and tell you guys about the casualties that have happened in this war. So this is the peace treaty. So Virginia got most of North Carolina, Florida got most of southern Georgia, and a little bit of South Carolina, just this part right here. Texas got a piece of land over here just because they don't border these three. So that's what that is. It's not a new state, it is just Texas. And this is a new state though. This is a combination of Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. Should I call it George Carolina? That'd be kind of funny, honestly. That's what we're gonna call it, George Carolina. But their capital is Atlanta, I guess, because that's really the only major city remaining. But we are going to have another alliance form. This is a military alliance. Oh, by the way, this is also a military alliance. This is both a military and an economic alliance. It's like a Rocky Mountains type thing, meaning there are not that many neutral states left, because most are a part of an alliance. Meaning next episode, there's probably going to be a couple alliance wars, but that's a spoiler. I'm going to see you guys in the next episode. Hope you enjoyed. Goodbye!